The moment Rick Dogwood's strain slapped the cap off Dorian Bloom's head, the desert heat seemed to pause. No one spoke, no one moved, but behind Dorian's stillness was the quiet tension of a man who had already measured every step, every threat, every way this could end. And when Rick shoved him a second time, he learned what it felt like to pick a fight with the wrong kind of calm. The sun over the Sonoran Desert was the kind of relentless that didn't ask permission. It just bore down, cooking the roof of Dorian Bloom's old Dodge Dakota until the air inside felt like a kiln. He could feel the heat through the steering wheel, even with the AC barely holding on. But he wasn't panicking, not Dorian. He'd done worse in worse heat. Spent days in the Iraqi sun with a rifle across his chest and no promise of shade. This was just Arizona on a Tuesday. The fuel gauge had been flirting with E for the last 10 miles, and the GPS hadn't shown any towns nearby. So when he finally spotted the gas station, weather-beaten, half-forgotten, clinging to the edge of the I-10 like it had nowhere else to go, he pulled in like it was an oasis. The sign just said, "GS" in peeling red letters, and the building looked like it hadn't seen a remodel since Clinton was in office. One flickering fluorescent light above the door, two lonely pumps and a convenience store with sun-faded soda ads taped to the inside of the windows. No cars in sight, no foot traffic. Just the sound of cicadas buzzing like power lines and the dusty wind scratching against metal. Dorian parked at pump 2, cut the engine, and stepped out. Sweat kissed the back of his neck the moment his boots hit the asphalt. He wore cargo pants rolled at the ankles, a sweat-stained Army PT shirt, and a cap pulled low over his eyes. He didn't look like much a traveling vet, maybe a student on a long road back, but everything about the way he moved was intentional, balanced, quiet. He swiped his card, selected regular, and started fueling up. Nothing fancy, just enough to get him to Tucson. As the gas flowed, he glanced toward the storefront. The inside was dim and empty, except for a woman behind the counter, maybe in her mid-50s, who barely looked up from her phone. Her hair was stiff with hairspray, her shirt had sweat blooming at the armpits, and her eyes flitted to Dorian for just a moment before dropping back to her screen. Beside the drinks cooler, a young white guy in a hoodie stood with earbuds in, bobbing his head to something only he could hear. Dorian didn't expect a warm welcome. He wasn't here for one. He just wanted to get his fuel, grab a cold bottle of water, and hit the road. That's all. He had a flower pressed into his wallet, kept there since the trip started. A desert mariposa lily, fragile, cream-petaled, rare. His mother's favorite. She used to say it bloomed under the harshest conditions and did so without apology. That always stuck with him. He finished pumping and headed into the store. Grabbed a bottle of water, a protein bar, and a bag of salted almonds. The clerk rang him up without saying a word. No smile, no eye contact, not even a nod. Dorian said, "Appreciate it," dropped a 5 in the tip jar, and walked out. That's when he heard them. The low growling rumble of motorcycle engines coming fast from the westbound side. He didn't flinch, just paused beside his truck, twisted off the bottle cap, and took a sip. The engines roared louder, then cut abruptly as 5 bikes slid into the lot like a pack of wolves circling prey. They parked diagonally across the pavement, taking up space like they owned it. The riders climbed off slowly, denim vests, scuffed boots, sweat-streaked necks, bellies stretching faded t-shirts, and the unmistakable stench of beer and sunburn. One of them, the tallest, had a red beard braided halfway down his chest, mirrored shades, and a sleeveless vest with a Confederate dogwood patch sewn on the back. He kicked his stand down hard and cracked open a tall boy the second his feet hit the ground. Dorian leaned against his truck and kept drinking his water. His eyes stayed shaded beneath his cap. He wasn't hiding, he was watching. One of the bikers noticed. Redbeard nudged the guy beside him and muttered something, eyes locked a little too long on Dorian's brown skin, his stillness, his calm. Something about that made them itch, like they needed a reason. The bikers didn't just park, they claimed the lot. One shoved the gas station door open so hard it slammed against the wall. The clerk jumped but said nothing. Another kicked at the trash can and laughed when it tipped over. No one tried to stop them. No one even looked twice. Dorian finished his water, set the bottle on the hood, and opened his bag of almonds. He wasn't trying to be brave. He was just tired, but he could feel it coming. Redbeard and the others came back out of the store carrying beer and cheap cigars, laughing louder now. They spread out across the lot like weeds. Redbeard looked at Dorian again and called out, "You lost soldier boy." The words landed sharp with that stretched-out southern drawl meant to sound like a joke, but sting like a blade. Dorian didn't answer, just kept chewing. Another biker, short and wiry with a crooked smile, stepped forward. "Hey, he asked you something, Flower Boy." That name hit the air like a dare. Flower Boy. Maybe they saw the tattoo on his forearm, a small lily, just above the inside of his elbow. Or maybe they were just reaching for anything soft they could try to break. Dorian looked toward the horizon, toward the highway, like he was calculating. 30 seconds, maybe less. That's all he'd need to leave. But he didn't move. Redbeard took another step. "What too good to talk to real men? You think you're better than us?" Dorian finally spoke, voice steady. "Just fueling up. Heading home." "Where's home?" Redbeard asked too loud. "Some city where you don't have to look people like us in the eye?" Dorian looked down at his feet, not out of shame but out of control. You don't give fire what it wants. He'd learned that in combat, in bars, in training rooms, in waiting rooms filled with eyes that already decided who you were. "You real military," Redbeard squinted, pointing at the tattoo. "Or is that just some college boy ink to impress your little hippie friends?" Dorian's jaw shifted slightly, but his voice stayed even. "I served." "Yeah," Crooked Teeth grinned. "Still looks soft to me." Redbeard stepped forward and with one slow, mocking motion reached out and slapped Dorian's cap off his head. It hit the pavement with a soft flop. A hush fell. Even the cicadas seemed to pause. Dorian bent slowly, picked it up, dusted it off, and stood straight. His eyes met Redbeard's, unblinking. "You get one," he said. The words weren't loud, but they cut through the air like thunder. The lot was still. The couple in the truck across the lot sat frozen, engine running. The clerk behind the glass was gripping the edge of the counter like it might move. The guy with the earbuds was gone, or hiding. The bikers looked at each other, then back at Dorian. Redbeard laughed, but it didn't ring as loud this time. "You gonna teach me a lesson, Flower Boy?" Dorian didn't respond. He didn't move. But something about the way he stood shifted. His weight settled. His hands stayed loose. His breathing steady. "Come on," Redbeard grinned. "Let's see what that pretty little lily means." He took one step closer. Dorian didn't flinch, didn't speak. But something in the air had changed. The heat didn't matter. The sun didn't matter. Just the circle that had closed around him, and what would happen if they tried to crush the wrong bloom. Rick Dogwood Strain took that final step forward, the heat bouncing off the asphalt like it was trying to crawl into Dorian's skin. The laughter behind Dogwood had died down, replaced with something quieter, anticipation laced with aggression. Dorian stood still, cap in hand, heart-steady spine, aligned like a steel rod. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't square up. But everything about him said ready. Dogwood didn't notice, or maybe didn't care. Ego had a way of blinding men like him. You get one, Dorian had said, and Dogwood had chosen not to listen. The second shove came hard. Both hands square to the chest, the kind of push meant to knock someone back just enough to feel humiliated. Only Dorian didn't move. Not an inch. That pause, barely a beat, was all the window Dorian needed. His right hand snapped up, grabbing Dogwood's wrist, mid-recoil, twisting the arm outward, up then down in one fluid arc. Dogwood's body folded like poorly pitched canvas. Before the others could even blink, Dorian had him turn one arm trapped behind his back, the other across his neck in a controlled angled hold. Dogwood grunted, off balance and off breath, his boots scraping uselessly against the pavement. Dorian didn't grunt, didn't flinch. His body moved like water, but water carved mountains. Crooked Teeth lunged next, maybe out of instinct, maybe trying to prove something. He came in fast, but Dorian was faster. Pivoting slightly, he released Dogwood with a guided shove and let the second man's momentum work against him. A half step, a hip shift, and Crooked Teeth met the ground with a sharp crack of ribs against concrete. The biker cried out, more from surprise than pain clutching his side. The third biker froze, mid-step, fist halfway up, his eyes locked with Dorian's. Not angry, not wild, just steady, calm, like he'd already planned what to do if the punch came, and was just waiting to see which choice this man would make. That biker dropped his hand. "Back up," Dorian said, voice low and firm, his stance still centered. "All of you. Now." The lot had gone dead quiet. The couple in the truck across the way hadn't moved. The woman had one hand over her mouth. The man gripped the steering wheel, white-knuckled, frozen in the passenger seat. Inside the store, the clerk held the phone to her ear like a lifeline, her other hand trembling just above the counter. But whether she was speaking to 911 or just holding it like armor, Dorian didn't know. Didn't matter. The fourth biker helped Dogwood to his feet more out of reflex than camaraderie. Dogwood was red-faced and furious, chest-heaving hair matted to his temples, but the fire behind his eyes had dimmed. He opened his mouth to bark something, another threat, maybe an insult, but nothing came out except hot breath. The fifth biker, the youngest, hovered near the bike's eyes, darting between his crew and Dorian like he wanted to vanish into the desert. Then came the sound. Sirens, faint at first, rising fast. Red and blue lights burst across the edge of the highway, then pulled into the lot in a spray of dust. A sheriff's department SUV, old but well-maintained, came to a stop just behind the row of motorcycles. The engine cut. The door opened. Out stepped a man in his 50s, lean, sun-leathered skin, stiff in the way only years of carrying a duty belt can make you. His boots hit the ground slow and deliberate, one hand resting on his holster. Not hostile, but not casual either. He scanned the scene, two men on the ground, one clutching his ribs, one wobbling on a bad knee. Three others standing in a rough arc. One black man alone, calm, unmoved, a half-eaten bag of almonds, still sitting on his truck hood. "Everybody freeze," the deputy said, voice sharp enough to slice the heat in two. No one moved. The clerk stepped just outside the glass door, waving the phone. "I called. I wasn't sure, but I called." "You did good, ma'am," the deputy replied, eyes never leaving the group. "Stay back for now." Dogwood found his voice. "He jumped us. We were just minding our business, and this guy went nuts." Dorian didn't say anything yet. The deputy turned toward him, slower now, studying. "You all right, sir?" Dorian nodded. "They surrounded me, shoved me. I told them to back off. They didn't. Anyone injured? No. Not me. Named Dorian Bloom." The deputy blinked, then tilted his head. "You wouldn't happen to be related to Master Sergeant Aaron Bloom, would you?" Dorian blinked back. "He's my cousin." The deputy let out a quiet breath that almost resembled a laugh. "Thought you moved like him. I served with him in Fallujah. Said his family back home could handle anything twice as ugly." Another cruiser pulled in then, this one newer. Out stepped a woman, sharp build, sharper eyes, uniform crisp despite the dust. She surveyed the scene in two glances, then walked over. "We good here?" the first deputy asked. "Working on it," he nodded toward Dorian. "Cam, this is Dorian Bloom, ex-Army. Says he was attacked." Her eyes narrowed slightly, then softened with something like recognition. "Bloom," she said. "You taught at that combatives workshop in Sierra Vista, didn't you? My brother was one of your students." "Luke Graves," Dorian nodded once. "Tough kid. You were the only one who tapped him out without showing off," she said with a half smile. "He never forgot it." Then she turned toward the bikers. "We're going to need statements. Video, too." The clerk raised her hand weakly. "There are cameras, inside and out. They saw everything." Dogwood winced. Another biker, still holding his side, groaned. "We didn't mean nothing. We were just talking." He overreacted. The deputy shook his head. "I've heard that tune before. Don't play it for me." The younger biker finally spoke. It got out of hand. He told Rick to back off. Twice. We didn't listen. The other men looked at him like he'd betrayed them. But he didn't flinch. Dorian stepped back, resting his arm on the door of his truck. The bag of almonds still sat where he left them. The pressed flour in his wallet felt like it had grown heavier. Not broken, just weighted by the moment. "We'll file a report," Deputy Graves said. "But cameras and witness statements will handle the rest. You won't need to press charges unless you want to. They won't want it to go that far. This whole thing's going to end up being a footnote in their lives that they'll lie about later." The first deputy nodded. "Cowards usually do." Dogwood tried to mumble something, but no one was listening anymore. Not really. The bikers began gathering themselves, bruised and quieter than when they arrived. They limped to their bikes. No insults, no noise. Just the sound of defeat in boots scraping asphalt. Dorian watched them go, not with pride, but with something closer to acceptance. He didn't want to be here, didn't want to teach them anything. But some men only learn when the consequences are undeniable, and some flowers only bloom in fire. The sound of motorcycle engines faded slowly behind him. a low growl swallowed by the desert wind and the steady hum of the highway. Dorian Bloom didn't watch them disappear. He'd already turned back to his truck, his hands steady even as the heat clung to his skin like regret. The pressed flower in his wallet, that delicate desert mariposa lily tucked into the worn fold of leather, felt heavier now. Not crushed, no, it was intact, but its weight had shifted like it understood what had just unfolded beside Pump 2 on that sun-baked slab of Arizona concrete. The deputies had spoken to him again, brief, respectful. Miles Fern, the older one, said he remembered Dorian's cousin saving 3 men with nothing but a busted radio and a roll of duct tape. Camellia Graves had knotted eyes still sharp, but her voice softened when she spoke. I wish more people had your control. Dorian had offered a quiet thank you, declined a hospital check, and climbed into the truck with the kind of slow, deliberate motion that said, I'm not injured, but I am carrying something. He started the engine. No one stopped him. No one needed to. The moment was over, but its shadow stretched long in the rearview mirror. As the sun dipped toward the jagged hills of the Sonoran horizon, Dorian drove in silence, the air inside the truck thick with more than heat. He didn't turn on the radio. The world didn't need to sing to him right now. He just needed the road. The stretch of I-10 between that gas station and Tucson was flat and familiar, lined with dust-coated bushes and forgotten exits. Every few miles, an old billboard or rusted road sign would flash by, some half-peeling advertisement for an extinct diner or a last-chance trading post. The desert had a way of holding on to things long after they'd stopped mattering. About 20 minutes in, Dorian pulled off at a rest stop, just a slab of concrete with a picnic table shaded by a concrete awning and a pair of humming vending machines. He parked, cut the engine, and sat still for a moment before stepping out. The wind hit him first, dry, gritty, carrying the scent of sand and memory. He walked slowly toward the picnic table and sat down, resting his elbows on his knees, hands clasped. His phone buzzed once. He took it out. 2 messages. One from his niece, Savannah, age 12, curious about everything, especially plants. Uncle D, what's the name of that yellow flower that looks like it's laughing, doing a school project on desert blooms? He smiled, the kind that only tugged half the mouth. He tapped out a reply, desert marigold. But my favorite is still the mariposa lily. Grows where nothing else does. He hit send. The second message was from a friend in his grad program, reminding him about their project deadline and a reading on botanical resilience. The irony of that almost made him laugh. Resilience. The word had been stretched and worn so thin in his life, it barely meant anything anymore. He looked out at the desert, watching the sky begin to change. That deep orange bleeding into pink, then into a purple that seemed impossible, like the desert was trying to apologize for being so harsh all day. A hawk circled high above its wings, slicing the light. Dorian thought of the moment Dogwood slapped the cap off his head, the way no one stepped in. The clerk, the couple, the kid by the fridge with the earbuds. None of them said a word until after. After he moved. After he made it safe. He wasn't angry at them. Not exactly. But he wasn't blind either. That kind of silence, intentional or not, was a choice. He remembered something his mother used to say, voice like, warm earth people think flowers are delicate, but the strongest ones grow where no one thinks to water. That's why he kept that lily in his wallet. Not as a symbol of what he'd been through, but what he refused to become. Small, hidden, quiet for someone else's comfort. He stayed at the rest stop for a while longer, not because he was tired, but because he needed to sit with the silence that wasn't afraid, that wasn't complicit, that just existed, honest and open and still. Eventually he got back in the truck and kept driving. The miles rolled under his tires like soft chapters fading into dusk. By the time he reached the outskirts of Tucson, the sky had gone full indigo with pinpricks of stars beginning to show through. City lights flickered in the distance, and life returned, gas stations that didn't feel haunted diners with kids laughing inside stoplights blinking in predictable rhythms. He pulled into the university parking lot, engine ticking with residual heat, and just sat there. The campus stretched ahead, buildings lit from within, music leaking out from dorm windows, the scent of grass and concrete, a breeze that felt almost kind. Students moved across the sidewalks, laughing, shouting, living. No one had any idea what had happened 90 miles south. No idea what it took to walk away from something ugly without dragging the ugliness with you. Dorian didn't expect them to. He didn't need applause. He just needed them to remember, if they ever saw something like it, that silence is a seed. If you don't choose what to grow, someone else will. He grabbed his duffel from the passenger seat and stepped out, locking the door behind him. The key clicked in his hand. He walked slowly toward the dorm building, the pressed flower still in his wallet, resting just beneath his ID. At the entrance, someone held the door open for him, a kid with a skateboard and a t-shirt that said, "Be the light." Dorian nodded. The kid smiled. It wasn't much, but it wasn't nothing. Upstairs, his room was exactly how he left it. Botany textbooks spread out, a dried cactus cutting in a mason jar, a half-finished thesis outline taped to the wall, persistence in arid environments. He dropped his bag, sat on the edge of the bed, and exhaled. The kind of exhale that came not from relief, but from release. Tomorrow he'd meet with his advisor. Later this week, he'd present on pollinator-friendly plants in low-water landscapes. Life would go on. But tonight, as the city hummed around him and the heat finally gave way, to quiet, Dorian Bloom remembered. Not the fight, not even the insults, but the stillness. The moment before it all snapped. The power in choosing how to move, how to hold a line, how to stand like the flower that carries your name. His mother had been right. Desert flowers never bloom quietly, but they always bloom strong. What happened at that lonely gas station in the Sonoran Desert wasn't just a clash between a man and a group of bullies. It was a test of restraint, dignity, and silent strength. Dorian Bloom didn't raise his fist first. He didn't throw insults. He didn't need a badge or a uniform to prove who he was. His calm under pressure spoke louder than their noise. And in the end, it was his control, not his combat skills, that turned the tide. There's a powerful lesson in Dorian's story, one that's especially important in today's world. We are defined not just by what we fight, but by how we choose to stand. Dorian's strength didn't come from aggression, but from clarity, from his ability to hold the line without losing himself. And that's something each of us can learn from. Whether you're facing bias, intimidation, or the silent pressure to stay quiet in the face of wrong, you have a choice. And that choice can shape the outcome for more than just yourself. But there's another truth buried in this story, one. We must not overlook the danger of silence. Several people watched Dorian get surrounded. They didn't join in, but they didn't speak up either. And that silence, as he reflected later, carried more weight than the shove. Because silence in moments of injustice doesn't keep you neutral. It makes you a bystander to harm. So to our listeners here at US, Instructive Stories, let this be your reminder. If you see someone being disrespected, threatened, or cornered, don't wait for someone else to do the right thing. Be the voice that breaks the silence. Be the presence that shifts the energy, even if it's just a word a step closer or a phone call speak. Because injustice grows in the cracks where good people stay quiet. And if you ever find yourself in Dorian's position, remember this. You don't owe anyone your rage, but you do owe yourself your dignity. Stand tall. Breathe. Move with purpose. And when the moment demands it, let your strength speak, not for revenge, but for respect. Thank you for spending your time with us. We hope this story moved you the way it moved us. If it inspired you, challenged you, or reminded you of a time when you had to stand your ground, please share it. Not for views, not for clicks, but because someone out there might need this story as much as you did. Until next time, this is US, Instructive Stories, reminding you, even in the harshest places, flowers bloom. And sometimes the quietest ones grow roots the deepest.